You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma Podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at citizensedmond, as well as go bank there because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password because I seem to forget it daily. So yeah, go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome. This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car. Hall of Fame, they're awesome. Citizens Bank's where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too, but I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode down at what is this building called officially? Do you know? Does it have a name?
It's on Automobile Alley, and I know they call this the Old Markham Building.
The Old Markham Building. Okay, well, we're in the conference room of Whitten Burridge at the Old Markham Building. You probably know it. You've driven by it. It's like one of the last ones on the end before you kind of go to downtown. Beautiful building. But it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you my guest today, Hannah Whitten, who is an executive producer, is a lawyer, is a 30 under 30 recipient. Anything else? Am I missing anything?
I think
you've done a lot, I'll be honest. You've done a lot. Your dad was previously on the podcast about 18 months ago, told a really cool family story and about his story, and obviously your family story about the things that you guys do. And it's a joy to see your and your dad's relationship kind of over social media and now wherever you guys post. And I think yesterday you guys were at lunch and everyone's dancing around and you pan to your dad. It's just like, this is not my thing, right? But I know he's there supporting you and supporting great causes as you guys do. But it's great to see your dad again today. And I know obviously he's a huge part of the things that you do and supports you with everything that he can. So it's for everyone listening, I'll put that link to it feels uncomfortable saying your dad is Reggie, but like Mr. Whitten, podcast below, and you guys can go listen to that because it's a great story. But today we're going to dive into Hannah's story. So, what's like? I mean, you're a lawyer. You follow in the family footsteps. Did you think that was going to happen when you were like going through education, high school, into college?
That's a great question. So when I was 5 years old, my eldest brother passed away, and I knew he wanted to practice law with my dad. I grew up under the shadow of that loss, and I knew it was really important to my dad to practice law with his children, and so I not only wanted to fill that gap for my family, but as I got older, I realized that this is something I have a passion for as well. Especially in high school and college, I realized that the law is just something I am completely interested and obsessed with, and so it actually worked out in that I can, make my dad happy and also pursue my dreams.
I think people listening are just going to go, aw, because that's really cool. And that's probably what every parent wants to hear, right? Is to hear that their son or daughter wants to follow them into business and family business. And I think it's such a, people talk about family business being very difficult, very hard to do, but it's such a blessing because, you get so much more time with your dad compared to if you're working anywhere else. Had the same conversation with Cody and Ashford Thompson of Thompson Designs recently, actually, too, because their dad actually just retired. But yeah, that's awesome. And so in kind of high school, you're kind of thinking, right, I'm going to be a lawyer at some point. Do you ever think like what law you're going to get into? Because you guys do pretty much everything here, right?
So that's a great question, right? And I think a lot of the lawyer shows you see are criminal law. I watched Law & Order just like everybody else growing up. And so I thought that was really exciting. And I thought there might be an interest in the criminal realm or maybe family law. And as I got into law school, I realized that I'm obsessed with the civil realm. And so that's really what this practice does, at least my half of it. I think people don't necessarily understand what plaintiff's work is, but what I do is I sue on behalf of individual people, just regular people every day. And I sue big corporations. I sue insurance companies that have cheated the little people. And so it's really cool to get to see my dad be such an advocate and the people on this team be such an advocate, and to also be a part of such an incredible team that really gets to help people who have suffered at the hands of big corporations.
Yeah, like David versus Goliath type stuff, right?
Absolutely.
You probably think, and people probably think, oh, you're never going to win. Why are you taking this on? And it's probably like it is in the movies, right? All the big companies are just like, oh, leave us alone. And then they're like, okay, we'll sell. Like, no, we're actually going to take you down. That's awesome. And I'm sure you've had moments like that. Suits is one of my favorite TV shows, as I'm sure it is people listening. I think everyone wants to be Harvey Specter. Or what's the lady's name in that? Not Meghan Markle, the other lady who runs the place.
Oh, gosh.
I forget her name. She's the boss. Anyway, fantastic TV show.
It is a great TV show.
Is there anything around watching law on TV that you're just like, it's so wrong?
Yeah, I mean, the fast pace of it, right, sure. Is that, justice is slow, and that's to protect us, is that, you have to file all these different papers, do all the different research, and so justice is not fast and exciting, it's not, sexy, it takes time, and I think that is probably the most frustrating part of seeking help.
Yeah. Where does the kind of, the movie side or production side of things weave into your story as well as you're growing up, or does it?
That's a great question. So after my eldest brother passed in 2002, my dad was actually getting a divorce at the time as well, and my family was going through multiple different tragedies and hardships, but my dad's friend brought him to Africa at that time, and he met Sister Rosemary Narumbai, and he realized that people suffer more than he had, and it really brought his depression perspective. I think he realized, he met children who had to kill their parents or their siblings, and that's almost unimaginable sitting here in the U.S. And so as he was thinking, why me? me. I've lost my firstborn son, my best friend. I think it showed him that life can go on and that you can enrich your life after a loss by helping others. And through that work, he decided to create a film with a local film company, Lampstand, and they created Sowing Hope. And I grew up in that project. I grew up telling my friends, pop some pop tabs for purses to send to Uganda. I remember telling my friends about Joseph Kony, and they were like, what are you talking about? I was kind of a weird kid, just for circumstances. So, I grew up in the nonprofit movie making industry, which is very different, than like the LA world, right? It's a lower budget, and not to say, Lampstand is high quality, but, they're working with a nonprofit. It was a lower budget, and so it's a different world.
Yeah. So you at that moment thought, maybe I'll get into this. Seems like a good thing, and I love doing it. And obviously it aids the mission, right? And the stuff that you see your dad working towards. And obviously before this, we have, like you just mentioned, this kind of thing for you, like I'm gonna go work with my dad, and if that's law or if that's production, like that, just wherever it is, I'm gonna weave in. Is there anything that your dad does that you don't want any part of? Yeah, he does that on his own, and that's just his thing.
Some of the addiction work, and I don't want to misspeak, I support my father 100% in the addiction world.
I was being...
But sometimes it doesn't feel authentic for me to speak on addiction, only because my father was a part of the struggle, right? He sat at home wondering, when is Brandon going to come home? And there were sleepless nights, and he can speak on those things and really relate to parents who are going through the same, or siblings or anyone. But my first memory of Brandon is his funeral. Yeah. So it doesn't feel like I am in a position to discuss a battle against addiction. And so because of that, I've always been hesitant to be, a frontline worker for fighting addiction through education. So I really want my dad to take the mantle there, because I think he is more impactful, and it doesn't feel I feel like I should help from behind the scenes. And so that's really what I do there. Yeah,
and then, transitioning into the epilepsy talk, like you were very present for that, right? For your
yes, and that's a totally different. So when Brandon had died, my dad threw himself into this world. It was a lifeline for him. By the time Dylan died, 15 years later, both my brothers died at 25. They died 15 years apart from two different brain diseases. But when Dylan died at 25 in 2017, my dad had built up some skills on how to survive a loss like this. And so he wasn't needing that lifeline, but I desperately was. And he recognized that in me. To be frank, I thought of suicide, and, it was definitely situational, but we were very close, and losing him was really, really hard for me. And my dad introduced me to Rinzai Stone. He lost, Rinzai and Leanne lost their son, Isaiah Stone, and so they created the Isaiah Stone Foundation. And honestly, it was a lifeline for me. It really was. It was an ability for me to meet families who reminded me of Dylan. But more than that, I remember the first event I went to for ISF, I met a family, and I was talking to the mother, and she, was like, why are you here? And I told her, my brother had recently passed, and she held me, and it just felt like a community that would end up saving my life. Mm-hmm. So for me, it wasn't a choice. It was like oxygen. I needed a way to move forward and to find purpose again. And it was the first time in my life that I wondered, should I go to law school? Should I continue on this path? Like what? Should I sell all my earthly possessions and do something else? And because grief makes you feel that way. So really, the epilepsy world, just out of necessity, has become mine and my family. My family is obviously supportive of me in this world, but really I've been the one that just can't get out of it.
Yeah, well, and looking back over your story, right, you kind of weave in and the things that you're passionate about into this story, and also, I don't want to kind of gloss over, like the charity side of things doesn't come without you guys putting in hard work in the law side. Like there has to be money coming from somewhere. It doesn't grow on trees. Like you guys work extremely hard, and your dad works extremely hard, to set up this business and foundation, and everything kind of flows through that. So you guys yeah, I can't imagine what it's like to think, when you're, 2017, you're like, do I go to school? Do I go and follow, a dream that I've had to go work with my dad in the law industry, which also then fuels the foundation side of things, right? Or do you, like you said, sell everything, get a backpack and move maybe to Africa and your boots on the ground, right? Like
Absolutely.
There's so many different ways to
make
do it.
Make an impact in a different way.
Yeah. And you guys, you have experience in both of those. Obviously, your dad's been over there, and you got the story with Sister Rosemary, and you've been over there multiple times.
I have.
Too, right?
I've actually spent around a month in total in Africa.
Tell me about that. How was that experience the first time you went over there?
I was 12 years old when I first went to Africa.
Oh, wow.
Sister Rosemary actually snuck me into the South Sudan, which was an active war zone at the time. It was a really incredible learning experience for me. And, I had seen Sowing Hope, so I knew about children who were forced to murder their families. But to hear them tell their stories through a TV show or a movie, but to be there in real life is a completely different experience. Very humbling. And, I think everyone is guilty of getting comfortable and taking advantage of the things that they have always wanted, but I think perspective is just so powerful, and it makes you realize how lucky and grateful you should be for your life. And so I just saw some people who had suffered more than I could even imagine, but what was really impactful to me is their level of joy. They are so joyful. When I first went to Gulu, Uganda, I was shocked. These people have, near nothing, and they are extremely joyful, and I think I took that home with me, that it's a choice to be happy.
Yeah, and again, that only fuels you when, on the law side of things too, because you draw from those experiences and you're fighting these big corporations, and you're like, I've been around people who have literally nothing, and they're the happiest people in the world, right? And,
really, yes.
But then it puts things into perspective for yourself too, because you come home, whether it's at a 12-year-old or you're 18, whatever it is, you come home and you're like, I really want this new purse, or I really want this new video game, and you're like,
yes.
Actually,
the rat race.
Yeah, right. Like, everyone knows me, and everyone knows I want a Porsche. Like, I don't shy away from it. I just speak it loud enough, and it will happen one day. But it's like those material things, right? They mean nothing, and it's family that means everything.
Yes.
But to all of us that are on social media and around all these, friends, and everyone's like, posting their life that's glamorous on social media, and in reality, it's nothing like that. Most people are anyway. I can't imagine how that put you in perspective as a 12-year-old too.
Yes,
right.
It's
like
very
most
powerful.
Adults don't get that experience, and you went over as 12, and you also went into a war zone, which I think your dad talked about that in a previous podcast too, which is kind of like, what is going on here? So how many times have you been back since then?
4. My last time was right before law school. And, I had planned on going in the middle of law school, but after I went to law school in 2019, so I had 1 semester of normal law school, and then COVID happened, and, the world shut down. So I have not been back since.
Yeah. Do you plan to go back soon, though?
I do. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but, for the first time I'm doing work outside of Uganda. I'm doing work in Kenya now. And I had originally planned to go down with the film crew for the doc, and I ended up getting sick right before, and so I had to cancel my already paid for tickets, and it was a super bummer, but at the very least, our film company could go down, and we ended up getting the film, and, I think I'm really proud of the final product, so yeah. I'm excited to do some work in Kenya, and we picked Kenya because, I think that there is this false notion that Africa has no resources or no movement or no healthcare, and that's just not accurate. We picked Kenya because there are Kenyans on the ground who are motivated to help stop the disinformation surrounding epilepsy and surrounding the fact that people think it's contagious or a curse. And so all we want to do is support the work that people already in the ground in Kenya are doing. I think it's very important that we are not white saviors. That's absolutely not the mission, and I don't actually think that you end up helping any community by taking your own personal biases and placing them in a different community. I think we've been really, really focused on trying to lead this with a Kenyan voice and consult with people on the ground and people who are really already doing the powerful work.
Yeah. We'll get into the documentary soon, but I want to set just a little bit more context first, because we could talk, I know, a lot at length, and we will talk at length about the production and everything, and it's heartbreaking that you weren't able to go over there, right, and just get sick and can't go, and the money for a flight, whatever, like that could be, we can always make more money, right, but it's just the time, the experience, like that's the stuff that you always miss out on, and just like, oh, really, but things happen for a reason, it'll come around. Before we get to talking about this production, had you done any production stuff before this? What were, like, I mean, because obviously it's 2024 now, you went through law school during COVID, graduated, and you've been practicing for 2 years, right?
I have.
So you've 2 years, before now in quote, dad's office, right? Your own office, but dad's law business. Talk about that. What's that like? Passing the bar, following your dreams, going to start and work with dad. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, well, when I started law school, my dad was one of the lead litigators in the state's opioid trial, which was a super unique experience for me. I got to watch this cutting edge trial right when I was starting to learn about law school. So fast forward, and I'm taking the bar, and all of this kind of culminates together. I think that it's an arbitrary way to measure intelligence. I'd like to state that for the record.
I'm a terrible test taker. So bad.
I did pass the bar on the first time around, but I will note that I don't think it's an appropriate way to measure intelligence. There are certain racial biases. But it was honestly the privilege of a lifetime. My dad hooded me at law school graduation, and he's my best friend, my hero, my mentor. It was a really powerful moment for me. But you asked if my previous experience in producing, and it's funny, I had no experience in the Sewing Hope. I was too young and I wasn't involved in that production. But during the opioid trial, my father got his knee replaced. So how that trial worked is, it was a couple-week trial, and then the judge took the ruling under advisement. It's a bench trial, so there's no jury. The judge gets to issue the final ruling. And so the plaintiffs rest their case, the defendant went, and then they rested their case, and then the judge took it under advisement for around a month. And the day of the verdict came. Anyway, during that month period, my dad decided to get his knees replaced. And when he came back on the day of the verdict, I, looked my dad in the eye. I was like, this is a big day, congrats. And I could tell something was wrong. He was really red and hot. I just could tell something was wrong. And you can actually pull up, this was all over the news. He did a press conference, and he looks like he's about to drop dead. He's hanging on a cane. And at first when I'd seen him, he was all red, and then at the press conference, he looks white as a sheet. He's lost all color. At that point, I tell my mom, I'm like, oh my gosh, something's deeply wrong. And so she takes him home that night, and there was a tornado. She tries to get him into the storm shelter and can't. He drops to the ground. She calls 911, and they said if he had waited throughout the night, he would have been dead because he had sepsis. And so it was really a terrifying experience for my family and I. My dad is my rock. And so in the next month, I sat down with my dad and filmed him on my iPhone camera, sort of like a coffee with dad. We both had coffees, and I just interviewed him about his life. And it was, a 2-hour production. I put it together in iMovie, and I sent it to him, and it meant a lot to us. And so he flipped it to Lampstand, our film company, and they actually turned that into a legitimate documentary. We're not going to share it with the world. It's just a family event, but to the extent that, I have any experience prior to the Curse of Stigma, that would be it.
Yeah. I almost want to replay that for people listening, because it's something that everybody wishes and everyone should do. And our iPhones are so easy to do. Just get a tripod, set it up, and sit. And my granddad passed last November, and I interviewed him probably 2 or 3 years ago. Didn't video it, but I had him on the podcast. And so, same. Only the family listened to it. We went back to Wales, sat around the dinner table, and just asked him questions about his life, right? And
that's so touching.
Right, and same for you to do with Dad, right? Because you don't know. Like the next day he could be gone, and that voice is not there anymore.
Absolutely.
Right? And now you have this 2 hours of him telling stories.
Yes.
Right, and especially when it's like you're around a table, you're comfortable. It's it's talking. He's not thinking about anyone else talking. In front of a crowd. It's just you guys, right? So he's really himself. Everyone else listening should do that because it's why I literally tell everybody to start a family podcast just to preserve those memories.
It's so special,
right?
And you can't unlearn that lesson. Like after my brother died, I texted everyone in our family. I said, please send me videos because I miss the sound of his voice. I have maybe 4 videos. He left me a voicemail singing happy birthday to me and then a couple. But I treasure all of those. I can count them on one hand how many I have, and so I always wondered, why didn't I film him? I had a cell phone, but I didn't, and I regret that, and I'll never unlearn that. Now everyone I love, I'm like, let me film you and ask you some questions about your life, and so you have it forever. And
I think there's a book that comes out or is out right now, and then probably there's one for women too. There's a man's one. It's like a dad's one that just says like 100 questions to ask your dad, right?
Oh,
if you Google 100 questions to ask your dad, I'm sure the book will come up. It's probably called something else, but you can ask, you can flip it and ask your mom the same questions, but it's just something we just don't do, right?
Yes.
And I just think that now, in today's society, and I've said this multiple times on the podcast, like we don't sit and have conversations with people, and that's why I'm fortunate to do this because I technically kind of made a sort of a living out of it too, which but if I didn't, it would be very difficult to have in-depth conversations with friends because you just don't do that, right? Because you're very rarely you one-on-one with someone. You mostly go out with friends. You're in a group. You're eating your dinner.
It's surface level.
It's surface level, right? You're not just like, hey, let's go talk about life.
Yeah,
right?
which is sad.
It is super sad, right? And I hope that people listening would make that a normal thing to do.
Absolutely,
right?
Especially with your parents. You don't know how much time you'll have with them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a complete mama's boy, so I FaceTime my parents at least once a week. Anyway, they'll probably get a kick out of that. So you have that kind of family documentary with Dad.
I do, and it means a lot to both of us.
And it's cool that it's not, like I said, it's just iPhone. It was purely just, I'm going to sit with Dad and tell stories. But is that kind of where you kind of think, I get a bug for this? Like, this is a lot of fun. The storytelling element of video is kind of something I think I can use as a tool to tell more stories and spread the message around, epilepsy and whatever it is that you want to spread the message around it.
Absolutely. Well, and what's interesting is, I had never thought about using it for any other purpose, but as I watched it back, there's a segment where my dad talks about, my brother's passing and the impact it had on his life and the work that has come out of our family. And I thought, man, that is such a powerful way to introduce people to nonprofit work. I think oftentimes people think about nonprofit work as something they have to check off in their lives, as something that they just have to fill out and do. But they're really missing the bigger point here. You get more out of helping people than you help them. It's incredible the things that you get back from giving to the right nonprofit world. And so you just have to connect and try harder to find your passion, your purpose. But it's kind of on that surface level length. It's not just friends or family. Like, I think society has stopped digging deep into connecting and understanding things in a broader sense.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's the buzz of giving, right? And sadly, I think people wait until they have money to go and be volunteer or go and do something charitable, because sometimes it's seen as a tax write-off and that's a benefit, rather than I'm going to go give my time and volunteer and hand out stuff, whatever it is. Give back, because it makes you feel so much more better than you actually, than you think, because there's a stigma around that too, right?
Absolutely.
Because people who have done that understand it, but others who are like, oh, maybe I don't have the time, but just go do it and you will realize how good it feels.
Absolutely.
To hear that. And then you add in the context of you going back and forth to Africa 4 times and you see like how happy people are, and you're like, okay, there's a lot more in the world than sitting on the couch to watch a football game.
Yes.
Instead of going and handing out whatever it is that you need to do to give your time somewhere else.
Well, and I've been surprised, and I won't say that this is even a large portion of the feedback I've gotten, right? It's maybe a handful of people, but I've had a handful of people reach out to me and say, epilepsy exists in the US. Why are you trying to take dollars to Africa, right? And I find that somewhat offensive, quite frankly. I do a lot of work in the US. I'm not abandoning US epilepsy causes. I just think a rising tide raises all boats. And if we can educate and add context to, the situations are just vastly different from the US and Africa. And I say that because stigma is very pervasive in the US. I don't want anyone thinking that I'm saying epilepsy stigma does not exist. In fact, a singular seizure can cause a lifetime permanent ban of a driver's license in the United States. And I find that to be really problematic, especially considering that this country has no infrastructure for walking. And so
public transport's
yes, so it really, it isolates people. But the stigma in Africa is quite a bit different. There are certain places in Africa that if you even say the word epilepsy, you could be stoned to death. Yes, and part of this, when I was trying to understand this issue, this was really helpful to me, but community trust is integral to every community, right? And so if you're thinking, oh my gosh, these people are seeing, these aren't real healthcare professionals, well, this person was told by their grandmother and their dad and their mom and their sister, this is someone your entire family goes to when they're sick. It's not, this is a trusted community leader. And so, yes, Kenya, for example, people think that it is witchcraft or a curse. And so even though in certain areas of the world, we know that this is a treatable, curable disease, people aren't seeking out anti-seizure medications or treatment because in that area of the world, they think they're cursed. They don't think that there is a medication that can help them or treat them. So I feel as though if epilepsy is a passion and a place that you want to do work in, we should focus on the countries where people aren't even aware that this is a treatable disease.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And obviously the dollar amounts that are needed to raise in the States go a lot further
yes.
in Africa, right?
Yeah, $5 a year can treat 70% of epilepsy.
Yeah.
That is phenomenal, right? And that's because of drugs like Keppra, and truly, I want to remark, these pharmaceutical companies are doing the best they can to get these drugs into less developed countries. But, they'll work with the ministers of health, and then the ministers of health are unable to determine how many people in their community need those drugs because they aren't seeking them out. So that's really the disconnect here. It's not that we're unable to get drugs there or that we're unable to get people to take them, but more that people don't even know that you can take drugs to cure or treat your epilepsy. So it's an information gap.
It's raising the awareness,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, because I can't imagine what it's like being, you're over there and the trusted, reliable source that you go to, in each town, village, city, whatever it is, family, says, no, you're cursed.
You're cursed.
Right? You're just like, what is this? This is not a movie or a book that I'm reading. This is real life.
It's real life.
So frustrating.
Yes, in our documentary, one of the key women that we follow, she was a school teacher, and it was her passion. She loved being around children. And her community found out she had epilepsy, and she was forced to stop teaching the children because they said, you're going to give it to our children. It's contagious, and you're not allowed around the children anymore. And what I found to be extremely devastating in this project is when we were doing research on what stories to tell, we partnered with Kawe and the International Bureau of Epilepsy. They helped seed stories on the ground and find the most impactful stories. But we saw that there were quite a few submissions for sexual assault during seizures, surrounding seizures. I could not believe that. That is, in my experience, that's not something I've ever seen in the United States. But because of how vulnerable you are during and after a seizure, there's also this sexual violence aspect. And so, and some women are told to cure their epilepsy, you need to resort to genital mutilation. And so it is a very different environment than we understand understand and see in the United States.
Yeah. So over the kind of period that you've been doing, epilepsy advocacy and raising awareness, because you travel a lot. You go to conferences, right? I think, did you go to Ireland when I recorded with your dad?
Yes.
18 months ago, you were about to go to Ireland, or you just come back?
We presented the extended trailer of the Curse of Stigma. So it was a 10-minute trailer. We can't present any longer in public because that will preclude film festivals.
Okay.
So there's all these special rules. But the International Bureau of Epilepsy is our partner in this. And let me backtrack for a moment. In this space, I met an incredible advocate and woman named Gardner Latham. She lost her son, I believe, in 2001, so right a year before my dad did. So she's been in this space a really long time. And she's with the Band Foundation, and she's the one who really introduced me to this treatment gap and the disparity between developed and developing countries. And so we decided to partner together. So the Whitney Foundation and the Band Foundation partnered together, and Gardner has been in the space so long that she knows the people at the International Bureau of Epilepsy. And so, she got us in contact with them, and they are now, getting a plan together for how to measure an anti-stigma campaign in Kenya. But that is happening right now.
Yeah.
And so we're really excited to not only show people about the issue, raise awareness. We are going to show this documentary in Kenya, which I think will be a huge learning experience. But I think it's important to tell people it's not just a documentary. This is associated with an anti-stigma campaign, and even $1 goes so far in Kenya that you could really save someone's life by getting involved. And so anyway, there was the International Epilepsy Congress in 2023 in Ireland. So we went out and presented this, and we were really nervous because this is the audience that we care most about. These are people living with epilepsy. These are people from developed and developing countries. And so I had multiple women from different regions of Africa, Rwanda, tell me that this is very similar to their experience living in Africa. And it doesn't just focus on women, but there is an added danger to women living with epilepsy. So the story really tracks 3 adult women and 1 female child, and the experiences that they face. And we really think that through watching these people struggle and struggle needlessly, because there are treatment available, I think it'll really move people to stop thinking this is a U.S. versus Africa issue, and more that we can help all countries through working in places that need the most assistance.
Yeah, that's, you're probably super nervous going over there, right? Because these are the people that we really want the feedback from, right? It's like, you're making a documentary about these people and the issues that they've had with epilepsy, and you want to make it real, you want to make it right. But that's also hard because you need to make the story compelling, and it needs to raise awareness. Like, there's so many different things you need to weave in as well for it to be,
quote, enjoyable to watch.
Yes.
To keep people engaged and understand the story, and there's so many different things there, but I'm glad it went well, which is good to know. And obviously to meet people, right, and build those connections, because that's only going to further everything else going forward. And you talk about Gardner and the people, the connections that you tap into when you meet someone like that.
Yes.
The work's already done. When you meet someone like that, you don't have to waste your time, knocking on doors that are never going to open. When you meet the real connector,
Yes.
And they lead you to another person, and that's how it works, right? Rather than, you coming over from the States, being like, hey, I'm making a documentary, and here it is, right? Like, I need to meet the people, right? And that's why also you go in person to these conferences and travel around the world and the country to share the message, but also that's where you meet everyone working towards the same mission.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, I think it's been a culmination, right? And so when I first got involved, I was only involved locally, and growing up, the only person I knew with epilepsy was my brother. He had uncontrolled, very severe epilepsy. He could have upwards of 100 seizures in one day and then go, a couple months seizure-free. He spent his entire life on a cocktail of drugs, we did put a device in his chest, and it curbed the seizures for a little bit. We attempted a brain surgery, but that was unsuccessful. And so we saw so many clinicians, healthcare providers, doctors. No one ever told me about sudden unexpected death and epilepsy. No one ever told anyone in our family, including Dylan, who is the person who deserves to know. And I want to remind you, this is the same country that advertises medications. You know, you see Viagra and it'll say death, stroke, heart attack. We tell people in America the truth about the pills they're going to take, the diseases they have. That is a part of having honest communications with your healthcare providers. There is an exception for people living with epilepsy.
Yeah.
People with uncontrolled seizures, the number one cause of death is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, SUDEP. No one is told about it, not by their doctors. And, you know, Cameron Boyce is a star. He was doing a movie with Adam Sandler when he died. I met his mother, and I couldn't believe their story. They live in LA. They have access to some of the best, quote-unquote, best doctors in the country. And they saw a doctor after Cameron had a seizure, and they said, "You don't have epilepsy. You have a seizure disorder. There is no such thing. A seizure disorder is epilepsy." And then he died of SUDEP, and they never told him. And so all of that to say, you can live in LA, you can live in Oklahoma, you can see the best doctors, you can see the worst, but there's a disconnect here. Nobody's getting told about SUDEP. And so when I found out about that, I couldn't believe this. I didn't understand it, you know, and so that's how I got involved in the wider world. I'm the youngest board member for the largest epilepsy nonprofit in the country, Cure Epilepsy, and Cure really introduced me to the broader world and Gardner Latham, and I sit on the board of the Partners Against Mortality and Epilepsy Conference, and every year people go to this conference and they put on, a very smart researcher from Harvard will put on a 15-minute presentation about why not a single doctor in the world, it's not just a US issue. It's in the UK. It's in developed and developing countries. They won't tell you about SUDEP. And so this is frustrating to me, right? But I started to feel like, what can we do about this? I'm meeting families 20 years ago that lost a kid to SUDEP. And I lost my brother in 2017. There's a kid I met last year who lost his brother to SUDEP. And so nothing is changing. And I started to feel desperate. And I needed something measurable, movable. And so that's why I was so desperate to jump on this, is that there's so much room for improvement and really to change people's lives. And I'll never stop fighting about SUDEP. That's always going to be something I'm passionate about. But I needed something that was changeable, you know, something that felt less entrenched in our society and something that I was, you know, it costs less money and it's easier to educate than this space, you know, for some reason.
Yeah. I can see why you're so fueled up about it, because there's been times, I'm sure, where you feel like you're banging your head against the wall.
Yes.
Like, why is no one figuring this out? It's already figured out. Why is no one listening?
Yes. I mean, you know, and you learn the risk factors, nighttime seizures, tonic-clonic, which means movement, all those things my brother had in spades. He was on a cocktail of drugs. That is a risk factor. And so if there was ever the poster child for SUDEP, it was my brother. And we deserved to know, you know, and it's still not changing.
And so this documentary then is helping share that story, dive into that, but also it's, like you mentioned, you know, a little bit ago, it's targeting the stigma, especially in Africa as well, because they think it's woo-woo and witchcraft rather than like, no, you can be fixed. Like there's cures for this or drugs for this.
Yes.
So it sounds like, you know, obviously, you know, you've been doing this quite a while then to spin out, you know.
7 years.
Yeah. So, but the documentary hasn't been going on 7 years.
No. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
My brother died 7 years ago, so the epilepsy work has been 7 years. But you're right. This project started a year ago. Now, we only have the finished documentary as of, you know, a month ago. And right now we are doing the International Film Festival process. And after that is over, we're going to release the film for free to the general public, because when we were at the International Epilepsy Congress, we had a clinician come up to us afterwards and say, can we use this as an educational tool? And I cannot tell you how much that excited me, because I was like, yes, you know, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this. So and there's nothing wrong with just creating a movie to create a movie,
Sure.
but that's not why we did this. We did this to make a difference, and so it's exciting to hear people who, want to teach at nurse conferences and use this film, or do this and use this film. And so, I think it will be the largest full circle moment is when we're back in Kenya presenting this film, and come hell or high water, I'll be there.
Yeah, you will be there. Yeah.
But we get to show this to the people who are in it,
Yeah.
right? And there's a part in the film where we go to, there's a slum in Nairobi in Kenya, but there is a clinic there. One of the most sophisticated clinics in Africa, and people are getting treatment there. And so that for me is the moment of hope in this film. It's like, yes, there is this cultural stigma and blockades to receiving legitimate health care, but also there is, without any intervention, there are people in Kenya who are Kenyan who are like, we have got to teach our people, help our people. And so all we want to do is amplify that message and support that message and support their healing and growth. And really, we have the opportunity to take millions of people who are suffering needlessly, who have they're having seizures for no reason. We have the ability to impact that in some way, shape, or form.
How did it feel seeing it finished for the first time? It's hard to describe. I watched it with my dad, and I'm just so grateful that he's supported me through doing this project, because I'm 27 years old and I'm a full-time attorney, and so there's no way I would be able to do this without his assistance. And so, we watched it together, but the film ends by a dedication to my brother and to Gardner's son, and I can't help but feel like Dylan would be so excited about this film. And that's not the whole reason I did it, but I feel like, SUDEP isn't talked about in this film. But you can prevent SUDEP by getting on seizure medications, right? And so all of this is tied together, and people will prevent SUDEP by seeking out anti-seizure medications. So to me, I think that this fulfills the mission that everybody in every country is trying to solve with epilepsy, is how do we confront the stigma, whether it be that you think it's a curse or whether you think people shouldn't be able to ever drive again because they've had one seizure in their life. Stigma looks different in different places, but it exists everywhere. And I think to see us be able to capture the hope that already exists in Kenya. We didn't create that. It already exists there, but to capture it and to show the world that even with little resources, you can create change that can impact the entire continent of Africa. Yeah, it's... I'm sure it was an emotional moment. You're sitting there with Dad watching it, right? And like you said, SUDEP's not mentioned, but it can be fixed by the byproduct of taking this medication.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be mentioned.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. Well, and my dream, and you're the first person to hear this, but my dream is to do a Curse of Stigma too. So once the International Bureau of Epilepsy gets all the researchers and all the movement down into Kenya, I would actually like to send Lampstand back down to film the campaign itself, right? And to see the measurable impact of this film. And, we're going to buy billboards and put up that it's treatable, it's not contagious, it's not a curse. And to actually be able to see how your dollars go to help and change a place, I think is what is missing in America, right? Is that we're all disillusioned. We're like, if we send $1 here, who knows if it gets there? Who knows if it's spent for the right thing? But our dedication to this project is legitimate. 100% of the funds that are raised go directly to IBE for the anti-stigma campaign on the ground. And so I think that is extremely unique in this world.
Yeah, 100%, right? Because there is, again, like you said, the stigma around charity and where is my money going? And, is it going to line the pockets of somebody else that's not even, whatever it is. People think that way about recycling as well, by the way. Don't look at recycling in the States. I'll just say that. Because you don't recycle, it goes to the same place.
It does, sadly.
No, but you're so right. And to do a second follow-up only makes sense because then you can prove what you've done, right? You show the change that's being made, and you hear the stories of someone's life who's been changed because of this. And those stories are out there already, but there's just going to be more of those stories when you do the second one.
Well, maybe we can start a trend, right? Everyone's talking about Quiet on Set. Have you seen Quiet on Set? It's about child stars on Disney who, face different types of harassment. But I wondered, they should donate those funds to survivors of child sexual assault, right? And so, I don't know, some of this is like, put your money where your mouth is. If you care enough to make a documentary about it, you should care enough to donate money to the cause, right? Because these documentaries, they're getting funds, they're on Hulu, they're on Netflix, they're getting money for that. And so I feel like hopefully we can also kind of start pressure to, if you really care about shining light on this issue, maybe you should also put some funds to it as well.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, this is seen as like a curse over there, right? So how were the film crews received? How was all that? What are the challenges of going over there and shouting out loud and filming this stuff and being like, this is not a curse, but you've got all these old generations, all these people who are trusted in figures, and that can't be hard to do.
That's a great question. There's a lot of distrust for Western and, quite frankly, Americans in Africa. There's a long history there.
You're not loved around the
I'm not going to defend it. By the way, I understand that. That makes sense to me. Americans are entitled and this and that. But, Derek is extremely experienced. He had actually just gone to Ukraine right before going to Africa. So I do want to note that this is no beginner crew. These are people that go in war zones around the country and around the world. And I do think that there is a level of distrust, especially in a community that has done a lot of this work themselves, right? They're thinking, oh no, are these people going to come in and take credit for what we have built here? And I'm really grateful that Lampstand and Derek did such a good job of making these relationships on the ground. Kawi trusted us and IBE trusted us, and that's because we're really focused on their mission and the integrity of promoting their values. But I think it was tough in certain circumstances, right? And, the traditional healer, our film crew was interested in filming some of that, but we were told you're not allowed to do that, which is understandable, right? It's almost like a cultural site. But there is a lot of distrust into us trying to understand the traditional healing aspect. And one of the reasons I wanted to understand it better is I actually believe there is a world where these two things exist side by side. You can still go seek out a traditional healer and take anti-seizure medications. One does not have to replace the other, and I'm not advocating that they should. So I'm just trying to understand the current infrastructure that exists so that we can complement it rather than offend or upset. But there is some protection around those traditional healers and some hesitancy to expose that to the Western world. So I think that was probably one of the trickier nuances of this film.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and the film is perfectly named because that's exactly what it is, right? Like there is a huge stigma around it, and to us in the Western world, it's like, yeah, there's drugs for everything, right? There's something that'll, that you can pretty much take something that will help you with whatever it is you're dealing with. But over there, culturally, they've done things drugs have never been created over there, right? Or, what I'm trying to say. They're not
mainstream.
They're not used to taking
pharmacies aren't on every corner
or something. You're not just like, oh, I have a sniffle, I'm going,
there's not advertisements on TV every day for pharmaceuticals. Yeah. We are ingrained and very comfortable with pharmaceuticals, and you're right, it's a totally different world.
Yeah, and so of course initially they're going to be like, no, we can cure this through natural healing or your own herbal medicine or whatever it is that they use, and that might have worked for so long, but obviously in the case of epilepsy that hasn't, and it's seen as a curse because they can't fix it.
Yes. Well, and we're thinking about the title, and the reason I love it so much is that, epilepsy is absolutely a terrible thing to live with, but we see the real curse in Africa as the stigma. That is what keeps people out of employment, out of education. It robs them of opportunities to live their lives. And so we feel like it's not necessarily the disease itself, because it can be treated, but more so the cultural stigma that surrounds the disease prevents anyone from actually seeking treatment.
Yeah.
So that's the true issue that we're trying to combat here.
Yeah. Who's the lady on the poster?
That's a great question. She is one of our featured women in the Curse of Stigma. So I think I had said this, but we have 3 incredible women who all experience different aspects of stigma. Something that we discovered while filming is that there's this secondary theme of the importance of caregivers. So in one of our stories, one of our women had a partner who, once he found out about her epilepsy, became extremely abusive. The domestic violence just was, unbearable, and he raped her. And and because of how epilepsy works, you're not sleeping because of all this, and so he made her epilepsy so much worse because he was, attacking her at night and this and that, and so he exacerbated her life problems. She got to the point where she thought of suicide, and then you look on the other side, the flip coin, right? And there is another one of the women that we have featured in the film, and her husband adores her. She's his entire world, and his family told him, "You need to divorce her. She's broken. She's got epilepsy, and she's going to mess up your whole life and eat up all your money, and you just need to get rid of her." And he was like, "She is my whole world. I will never leave this woman." And so her epilepsy, is better because of the support system. She's able to sleep, and so even without adding medication, you can see the differences in these 2 women's lives just based on the people that love them and support them, and that was such a surprising secondary theme here. But that's true in the U.S. too, right? Is that the people who support you, and this is bigger than epilepsy and your cancer and everything else, and it has such a huge impact on how it works out, and I think that is a beautiful message to share.
Yeah, 100%. It's the environment that you're around, right? And you grow up in, and that, whether that's if you have epilepsy or not, the being around a loving environment does wonders for your mental health, your well-being, your physical health, whatever it is. It works. If you're not, you're constantly in a state of fight and flight, and your body's freaking out, doesn't know what's going on.
And it's not your own.
Exactly, and you're making decisions based on that, which is not sometimes decisions in the best of your interest in the short term and long term.
Yes.
So it's not good. So DeadCenter Film Festival is where you guys are going to release this, I guess. Is that the first one before you go on the film kind of tour?
So I will need to get an update on the first. Okay. I don't want to speak out of turn quite yet. But for me, DeadCenter is especially special to me. Oklahoma is my home, and there is such a heart for service here. I'm very proud of Oklahomans and how they embrace causes that affect people on the other side of the world. Most of the comments I've gotten about taking dollars from the U.S. to Africa are not from people from Oklahoma, which, is what it is. But I personally have been so lucky and fortunate to have the press in Oklahoma be interested in this film. And so for me, DeadCenter is my most excited film festival because I have been just so moved by how embraced this film has been in this community and how supportive people have been throughout this process, because really for me this all started because of the death of one Oklahoma boy and how much it devastated our family. So DeadCenter is very important to me and my family, and to Derek and Lampstand, and we're really excited for the people in Oklahoma to get to see this film.
Yeah. Remind me the dates. Is it June
6th through the 9th.
Okay. People can go see that and get your DeadCenter tickets, and there's a lot of cool stuff at DeadCenter, and this is one of them, so you need to go check that out. Is there a website for the documentary movie we can send people to?
Yes, thecurseofstigma.org, and right now it has all the information about the treatment gap and why why we've created this film. It has our trailer. Our trailer is also on YouTube, and it will have concurrent updates on when the film is going to be released. We're going to release it for free to the general public as soon as the film festival circuit ends. And hopefully everybody takes the time to watch it. It's only 30 minutes, so it's not a big part of your day. And I think that this could save lives.
Yeah, if it saves one, right, it's totally worth it. This is awesome, and I love seeing your passion for it. It clearly comes through. It's not just about, kind of doing this for your brother, right, and your family. There's a greater mission here and a greater, hope for this, and that's, it's not easy to change people's minds of thinking something is cursed, but you guys are doing it person by person, right? And so going over there, boots on the ground, having an impact is not easy to do. And by creating this, you're bringing that awareness and bringing it stateside to raise the money to send back over there is, it's pretty special.
I appreciate you saying that. I honestly feel so grateful to be in the position I am, because 7 years ago, I couldn't imagine moving forward. It sort of felt like God pressed pause on my life, and I watched everyone else speed past me. And I only became unstuck once I realized that I could help other people just by telling his story, just by being involved. And so I would encourage anyone listening who may be struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts to reach out to me, to reach out locally. I would love to help you show to get involved and how that can help you. So if there's anything anyone takes from this, I hope they learn that helping others helps themselves. And I needed something good to come from the worst tragedy of my life, and it looks a lot different 7 years down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it'll look a lot more different in another 7 years, right? When there's a Stigma 2 out, and you're continuing to compound and snowball that effect of changing lives and then doing what you do. And it's you could just do this full time, right? But you don't. You work full time as well as doing this, and so it's great to see. I'm sure Dad is extremely proud of you. I can tell that already. It's fun walking in here, and just the way that he looks at you, he's extremely proud of you, and that's really cool. So for people listening, we'll put the link to the website, and also remind you the dates of DeadCenter in the description down below. And thank you so much for sharing. It's I know it's not easy. Family tragedy is horrendous to deal with and to continue to talk about, but you need to continue to talk about it to continue to spread that message, and I appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you, Mike, for telling important stories, and I really appreciate you telling mine. I hope that people are impacted in Oklahoma by it, and you're very, very powerful in your message, and you're also very nuanced and careful with stories like this, so I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For people listening, thanks for checking in, and we'll catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at Citizens Edmond.
as well as go bank there, because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password, because I seem to forget it daily. So yeah, go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome. This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.